and Craig Smoak.
Texas Tech Sideline Reporter, RedRaidersports.com. Chris Level joins us on 365 Sports. Chris, thanks for your time as always. The schedule came out on Tuesday. Everybody's got a reaction to it. What, in your opinion, has been the overwhelming theme out of Lubbock?
Well, football schedules are like recruiting classes. Everybody loves theirs, right?
Yeah, good.
It's like,
There you go.
Yeah, that's right. No, I saw, Joey was at the Tech basketball game in Fort Worth last night. We had a brief chance to talk, and we kind of had the same thought process in that, your 4 of your first 5 are at home. 5 of your first 7 are at home. That's probably the thing that you look at that just jumps out at you initially. Everybody's got these 2 bye weeks, which I think is great. I think it's good for all parties. It's good for the folks that covering it. Mm-hmm. It's good for the players, spacing it out, all those things. So I really like the kind of extended calendar a bit now that everybody's kind of starting in August. But yeah, the loaded, the front end home portion, I think is what jumps out at me at first, because Texas Tech and Joey's first 2 years, it's all been it's been about how well you finished. And you've started kind of slower out of the gates than I think he would obviously prefer. And so maybe this year, based on the way it looks on paper anyways, it's not obviously played on paper, but maybe you have a chance to get off to a hot start.
What do you think about their between the buys stretch of Baylor, TCU, Iowa State, and Colorado?
Yeah, there's the back-to-back road trips. I think Fort Worth and Ames is a tricky little stretch right there. But yeah, that's where because I mentioned the first home games, and these are all, a lot of these are the new schools. So it's kind of like when you look at it on paper, it's like you're playing Washington State in the non-conference, then you play, I think, Arizona State, Arizona, and Cincinnati. And then you get the portion that you just mentioned, other than Colorado, it's kind of like old home week, although I guess Colorado can be kind of thrown in there from the original part of the Big 12. So, that's where I think that the fans get a little more energized and there's a little more familiarity and all those things. And that's where, we start to get really serious about the conference race and all those things. But it's that back-to-back weeks where you go to Fort Worth and Ames. And last time I was in Ames, it was a bit later in November, and it was 0 degrees. Like there were no degrees to be found. It was. I'm drinking chicken broth on the sideline. It was even too cold for the Iowa State fans. So when I knew that you were going to play at Iowa State, I'm thinking, please don't give you the late November. And I've already looked. It's on average 58 degrees to 34 degrees is the window. On November the 2nd for Ames, Iowa. So I'm going to hope it's closer to the 58 than the 34, but man, I'll take it.
Chris, when the 4 new schools join, I guess there's a little bit of a history, hit or miss there with Texas Tech and some of those schools. I know they played Arizona State just a few years ago. It's been a little while against Arizona, but of those 4, there's the obvious old Big 12 connection with Colorado, but do you foresee any of those becoming an interesting partner in the Big 12 or perhaps a rivalry? Is there any history there that could get interesting?
Yeah, the 2 Arizona schools, way back in like I may be wrong on the decade, but like the 40s or 50s, I think Tech used to be in a conference with Arizona schools, the Porter Conference. I don't think a lot of people, realize that. But you've actually played both Arizona and Arizona State fairly recently. I'll tell you this. This is how long Alan Bowman's been in college. Alan Bowman got hurt playing at the University of Arizona in either his first or second year at Tech, I guess. And he's coming back, and you'll see him on the schedule this next year playing for Oklahoma State, his third school. But yeah, I think those two, there's some. Because proximity-wise, they're fairly close. Especially considering some of the other schools. But the whole Phoenix area is fairly close to Lubbock when you look at everybody else, comparatively. And so there's always been, I think, a mutual interest in playing basketball and football with these schools. You played them both in basketball, home and homes, and things like that in the last 10 years. But I think that's an interesting stretch. And then Colorado, that's more of a Big 8.
Yep.
And all that. Obviously, I think everybody's excited about Dion and that whole deal coming to town, and that'll be a hot ticket in Lubbock, as it will be for everybody with all the pomp and circumstance that comes with that. So, but yeah, I mean, look, this isn't the original Big 12. We all get it, but it's the best of what everybody could put together, and I'm excited about it. I choose to be optimistic about it.
1932 to 1956, Texas Tech was in the Border Conference, and you're right, Texas Tech and Arizona State, and those two have a pretty good history from way back. So, Joey, year one, lots of excitement because he takes over. Year two, the hype was even higher because of how they ended year one. And then last year, of course, they ended decent, strong with Joey again. So what's the level on a scale of like 1 to 10 compared to last year entering this year?
Yeah, he's not gonna. I don't think he's not gonna talk up this team like he did last year. I think that it'll be about keeping your quarterback healthy. But I think there'll be some expectations with this team. I mean, they're not going to be picked to win the conference or anything like that. Now, granted, they weren't last year either, but I think that'll be Arizona and Oklahoma State and some others. But I think that he really, again, like most, he really liked the portal class that they brought in. They brought in a lot of old guys up front and at tight end, and they get a really good running back in Taj Brooks that may not be the best in the league, but he's going to be in the very short conversation of best backs in the Big 12. It's fascinating how things go in cycles.
Oh yeah,
all these running backs, Devin Neal and Ollie Gordon, and Cincinnati's got a 1,000-yard rusher coming back. It's just wild how it kind of goes in cycles. When we used to know every quarterback's name and all these receivers, now it's running backs and running the football and kind of almost old school. So, but yeah, there's some excitement, I think for sure. And, winning a bowl game in back-to-back years hadn't been done. He's back-to-back, had winning records in the league, which had not been done since Mike was here. So while it wasn't what they had hoped, there was some tangible progress with this program and consistency that they've shown. But he's not, and he will tell you, he's not about being 6-6. This isn't what he signed up for. It's not what anybody wants. It's not what he's okay with. And so, yeah, they'll try to push forward and see if they can't, push this thing even further.
Do you expect him to maybe change? Because the 2 years, they've been just wrought with quarterback injuries. Maybe what they're doing on the offensive line a little bit, because it's just me outside observation. Like, that's kind of the connective tissue to why all the quarterbacks keep missing time.
Yeah, they have been average on the offensive line. And some of the injuries, you could maybe point to that, but some of them it's just like fluke stuff, like Tyler Shuck a couple of years ago was diving into the end zone, scoring a touchdown in Austin, and he breaks his collarbone. It's just the way he fell. And it's a 2-yard zone read. Like everybody runs, Shuck last year when he got hurt, he's just in the pocket, and Baron Morton got hurt with his AC joint. And he's just being flushed from the pocket. And so he's just scrambling, rolling right, not a ton of pressure. And he lets it go a little bit later than he should have. It gets landed on, and, away we go. But they admittedly, to your point, they must get better on the offensive line. And I think they knew it. They've been just too average there in back-to-back years, and they hit the portal hard there. They added, a Toledo senior and a Memphis senior and, a big-time junior college kid that USC wanted and some other folks. And so that, they needed to change that room quite a bit. And until they do, and until that is really consistent, they're not going to be what they want to be ultimately, and that's just the way it's going to be. But and some of this is just dumb luck, man. It's like when Mike was here back in the 2000s, they had like a year of like 6 or 7 where they had a quarterback start and finish every single game. They've been on a streak now, and everybody's seen it. Really since Mahomes, left here, you've started not just 2 but 3 guys in the season, and you have a hard time winning that way. Bottom line, I don't care who's calling the plays, what play is called, what is around them. When you're sending an 18-year-old kid, to BYU on a Saturday night trying to win a football game, that's a lot to ask. And they've had to do too much of that in the last 3 to 7 years, and it's just kind of caught up with them a little bit. But until you keep somebody healthy there, and they made a conscious effort to go add somebody in the portal there. Didn't graduate any quarterbacks. You do lose Shuck to the portal and all that. He's got one more year, but you have a high, big time signee in Will Hammond, but they went and found a D2 kid just to add into the mix to create some more depth there, just in case, because this is the way it goes around here.
Chris, when you were sitting there doing games and Patrick Mahomes was doing his thing for Texas Tech, did you have any idea you were watching one of the greatest football players to ever play? And we still don't know just how great he will be when all is said and done, but just incredible to get back to the Super Bowl once again. I know that with the brand switch that he's a part of that with Adidas and what Texas Tech's going to be doing moving forward. So I guess kind of two parts. Did you have any idea of his greatness at that time and the levels of it? And also just, is there any way to even put a number on the amount of good that Texas Tech gets from having a guy like Patrick Mahomes and just the brand that he has become?
Well, the answer is no. Nobody saw this. From Cliff or anybody that tells you, oh yeah, I knew he was destined for just the face of a league. I mean, that's kind of once in a generation type stuff for these players. When he was here, he was freakish. He did a lot of crazy things, the no look. He scrambled around and throw it up to Jakeem Grant. And you're like, how did he do that? The game with Baker and that OU when they get into the 60s and 70s. And it's, but the defense was bad here. It's well documented how, it's like, how did they not win more games with him at quarterback? Well, the defense was just really, really bad. And he felt like he had to score every time. But to answer your question, no, nobody would have seen this. I knew that this was a different deal when the NFL folks were basically suggesting, in the middle of his junior year, like, man, he might be first round. And I'm thinking like, wow, like really? Like, is this what we're doing here? And then after that year, it's like, hey man, I'm not coming back. He's going to declare. And I thought, guys, he made a mistake, and I mean, obviously, no, he didn't make a mistake. He was picked 10th or 11th by the Chiefs. They traded around and he's a small corporation. I mean, I can't even imagine, and people are starting to get tired of that story and the Kelsey and the Taylor Swift stuff, and the Chiefs have been so good. So it won't be long before people try to find more and more negatives there, because they've been in the AFC Championship game in four or five of the 6 years he's been the starter. I mean, kind of unprecedented. The MVPs, the Super Bowl wins, but Tech is trying to. They've got a great relationship with him, and this is his way of, I think, giving back. Is he was really involved in the Adidas deal. He's going to design a uniform as part of that. He's making sure that Adidas gives to the collective as part of this agreement. I mean, he feels like this is his way of giving back to the university that gave him a chance, and Texas Tech is very lucky to have somebody like him as an ambassador for sure.
Chris, the basketball team 5-2 lost last night. TCU is very explosive. They're also very experienced. Grant McCaslin is never a question. He was going to be successful. It was just a matter of how it all will end up. How do they make I guess, the pie really good? And they're a grinder. He's a grinder. He wants to play defense. Your impressions on their first 7 games in the Big 12?
Love Grant. Known him for a long, long time since he was here initially 20-something years ago. Great guy and wants to win. And you're right. I mean, he is a grinder. And they're what I've appreciated or I guess respected this year is that this isn't like your typical Grant McCaslin team. This isn't the grinded out defensive team that he would ultimately want. But these are the pieces that they kind of went to go find, and they've kind of changed who they are on the fly a little bit, and they're maximizing it, and that's a sign of a good coach. They're not – the crazy thing is, in my opinion, they're not near as talented as they were last year, okay? When you just talk pure talent, Jalen Tyson and Fardaws and Bacho and all these guys, Davion Harmon, they had more depth. There was some talent there. But it was a train wreck from a chemistry, selfish, just what are we on a night in, night out basis. And Grant has taken a slightly less talented group and is squeezing everything he can out of them. And they're going to be a tough out. They have big time shot makers. They're not the biggest team, which is going to get them in some trouble. And they've lost one of their positionless guys in Devin Cambridge for the year, and that's going to hurt them big time. But what he's got, I mean, it's pretty fun to watch. And I keep saying, man, I just don't know if they're that good, and yet they keep winning. And that's a prime example. Last night it's a bad matchup versus a long athletic team like TCU, and they still, they were fighting till the end. It was a 3-point game with I think 40 seconds to go, and then they miss a shot, and then they make some free throws, and it ends up being a 7-point loss. But I've been very impressed with what Grant's been able to do, and I think it's just a starting point here. But it's a good fit for him here.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it, Chris. Your time. Chris Level with us, RedRaidersports.com. Football sidelines, does basketball.